Hi guys, Oliver here from Spitfire Audio. In this video I have the pleasure to show you some tips and tricks and some don'ts to bring your composing level from good to great. Check out the link below where Homai shows you some tips and tricks to begin your composing journey. So in this one, we'll address some tools and some useful things that you should know, as well as a short analysis of a piece I've written recently. So I want to start out with a couple of things that I've observed recently, and these are like huge don'ts. So it's about knowing your tools and your sounds and how to use them accordingly. So as with usual instruments, the virtual instruments have each of them their unique strength and they're kind of built for something specific. And you want to listen out for that. So I've just loaded here the chamber waves of Oliver Arnold. So it's one of my personal favorites and it just sounds so gorgeous. If you just play a simple chord, like just let's say a C major chord, don't need to be a huge pianist for this. Going to the fourth mode. Even just that sounds really beautiful. You need a MIDI keyboard and this library for it. Not even touching one of these controllers here, which I'm talking about just in a bit. But what I've seen before is that people load things, or for example, this Evo grid. This is a technique that Spitfire invented, the Evo grid, which are evolutions. So you have to hold down the keys for a while for it to evolve. I've seen people or experienced people playing things like this. Which these are staccato notes. So you want to know what the library is for. Obviously, you won't hear anything, so you feel like, oh, what's going on here? But then when I hold this simple C major chord again here, all of a sudden magic is happening. And these libraries, these evolution libraries, can really take your composition to the next level because they're pre-recorded phrases. And in this case, they're produced by Oliver Arnold, who definitely knows what he's doing. And so these movements and different techniques, they're just kind of bring this certain magic to your composition. Another thing that I've seen people doing a lot is loading loads of different instruments into one contact instance, into one track, which can be a good idea to combine sounds, which I'm talking about in a second. But if you do this, so if you load our legato patches here, so violin legato, violin 2 legato, and viola legato, and you want to create this kind of ensemble sound, and you start playing like this, like an ensemble, let's say the C major chord again. It doesn't quite do what you expect. It's because they're legato patches and they're meant to be played legato. And my personal recommendation is to have, if you use legato specifically, one legato instrument per track. So here I would have violin 1 legato, then I would create a new track and I have violin 2 legato. So you program each of these legato patches separately. Another important thing in terms of legato, and legatos is one of the things that you want to really start using if you want to bring up your composition level, is that the notes have to overlap. And I've observed this in countless YouTube tutorials or tracks or playdowns. And this looks something like that. I'm just going to play something short here. So here you can see that those two MIDI notes are overlapping. This needs to happen, and here as well, because the legato transition is only being triggered once these notes are overlapping. Going back to knowing your tools and your sounds, this is again hugely important with our library. So this Spitfire Chamber String Essentials, they're very good in detailed writing. orchestral music, dramatic TV kind of music writing. It's not very good in sharp, punchy pop stuff or electronic kind of staccato strings. We have other libraries for that. We have the studio strings, or we have Abbey Road 2 that do that really, really well. So it's important that you know that. I want to write a short piece here demonstrating you the use of libraries and tools accordingly. So I'm just going to play a few bits here. I want to share with you another tip, which is layering sounds to create your own. Obviously, these tools are publicly available and a lot of people are using them. So how can you stand out? Well, you can mix these sounds because the combinations are endless. So I've showed you these chamber grids, these evolutions. They're absolutely stunning. And another library that we have is the harp swarm. So these are like tremolando played. I think it's about 19 harp players at the Hall in Air Studios, and they all play tremolandos, and it just gives this warm, beautiful kind of feeling. So we've got this, turning on the Evo grid. And you've got something completely new and unique, in my opinion. Let's just lay this down over my composition. Then again, this is knowing your tools, your arsenal. Alternative Solo Strings, one of my go-to library specifically for bass pizzicato. It's a single double bass recorded in a dry spot, and it sounds really wonderful and punchy. I'm saying dry, but I'm putting a little bit of reverb on here. I can turn this off. Really, really cool stuff. So just adding a little bit of that flavor in there. Just quantizing that a little bit here, not too strong. Then from the same library, we have the spiccato. So again, this library is much more dry, and I'm combining these lush Oliver Arnold's chamber waves and the chamber grid with the swarm, which is really wide, but then I have something quite close. And this is also an idea of layering and combining sounds to potentially make it your own. Something like that. So that's enough. I just want to keep that going. Played terribly out of time, but luckily we have the digital audio workstation these days that can fix that for me. So let's see how that sounds. At this stage, I want to share some simple production tricks that again can enhance your composition, make it slightly different to a beginner level composition, which is adding some basic effects. So now we have this cello spiccato here. Just going to loop this a little bit. Then I'm putting on some sample delay. So as you can hear, it makes it wide immediately. And then what I would like to do is I'm going to duplicate this. I have this 1 octave up for the viola. I have the same effects on there. Sample delay. This time the other way around. So I delay the left side. So we'll hear the right side more of the viola. And together it sounds like this. And with the composition. The next thing I want to talk about is legato, dynamic and expression, and vibrato. I think we can touch upon this just a little bit. I've talked about legato in the beginning, so your don'ts and do's with it. And a next addition to legato writing is your dynamic and your expression. It's not only with legato. I mean, you've seen me using the faders before with the swarm and the grid, but basically this is extremely important with our library. So the expression, usually the left fader on RGY, and here in contact, you can see expression here. And it's a little bit of a misleading term, expression, but it basically means the overall volume of the instrument. The dynamics is actually the one that is really, really important. So when we record these libraries, we record different dynamic layers. So from piano to mezzo piano, mezzo forte, forte. So basically from quiet to really loud. And by moving this slider, you address and you trigger these different samples. So if it's all the way down, you don't just turn down the volume of the instrument, you actually address the player playing really quietly, which is a difference. You can just hear how the player digs in a little more. And so when you write, this is very, very important that you use these sliders. So in my case, I have a controller here. This is a MIDI controller. I've just got sent this from Pierre by Nuance Controller. A little inset there, but it's a magic little controller. Thank you so much if you're watching, Pierre. And it's just really, really lovely. This kind of custom made thing. However, don't worry, if you don't have one of these, you can also draw them in. So let me just record a little bit of a line here. Medium inspiring line, but it's for demonstrating purposes here. Again, making sure these notes overlap. So now you've seen me doing this on my controller, but imagine you don't have this controller, so you wouldn't have this information here. So I believe in other DAWs it's the same, in Ableton, in Pro Tools, etc. You can draw in MIDI CC, MIDI automation. So you go down here, you choose expression and modulation. So expression first. Again, it's the overall volume of the instrument. So you can be a little bit more generous with it. So let's say we start a little bit more mezzo forte, and then here in the end, we were going to go climax and we turn this whole instrument up. Again, here we want to start maybe mezzo piano, going into mezzo forte, down again. And in the end, we really want to emphasize and go into forte. One more thing I think I want to add, and this is just a small thing. We have here, if you click on the middle, we have vibrato, and it just gives a little bit more life into the performance to show you Let's just add a little bit of vibrato here. Vibrato is number 21. You have to know that. So if you don't have a controller here, then you want to address it here. You can draw it in. Let's say, again, I start with pretty much no vibrato. And then here, I'm going to ramp it up and I have full-on vibrato. So I'm going to just play this one more time to you and listen how the performance really changes there of the violin. Another small tip before we dive into this quick analysis of my piece, and I've observed this a lot as well, is layering too much. So if we have a library like eDNA, which is our synth engine here, you have to listen to the quality of the sound. How much frequency, how much bandwidth does this whole thing take up? So there's a lot of stuff going on everywhere in the frequency spectrum. So you might want to do something that's much higher up, or just something that is incredibly subby, but there's not much room for a layering. So just a small tip on the side. Again, this is kind of knowing your sounds, knowing the qualities of the sounds, and it's just kind of a don't to really make sounds super thick. And I think it's a common misconception that you make it louder by layering all of these loud and big sounds. I think you actually make it more quiet, because they're kind of fighting each other. So actually I've prepared Albion 1 here because I thought this is a perfect library for beginners, intermediate kind of level, because the Albion 1 actually features the whole orchestra. If I would recommend one library, if you don't have a library yet, then this would definitely be the one to get into cinematic composing and production. So we have these Brunel loops here, which are pre-recorded rhythms, and they can be really inspiring. They can give some tempo and rhythm to your cues. We also have the whole orchestra, just to quickly show you the brass, strings and woodwinds. It's all nicely kind of mixed for you, so it's made for just immediate writing without knowing too much programming. We also have really big percussion in there and some pads and Atmos, etc. Very useful library. So let me just lay down this busy hi-hats here. Now, my last tip, and I think this is the most important one, is listen to good music. Listen to well-produced music. Listen to well-written music. I know sometimes it can be hard to find out which music is good, and obviously it's also to do with taste. But I think in terms of film music, it's probably safe to listen to people like Hans Zimmer, Alexandre Desplat, Alberto Iglesias, Ludwig Göransson, just all the people that are kind of famous and at the top of their game, really. And then just in general, I think in your spare time, just try to listen to good music and get your ears just used to good music. I listen, for example, to a lot of orchestral music at home as well. So it's just my ears are not listening to virtual instruments all the time. So I try to have my ear also listening to classical music, or I go to classical concerts. You know, that's a very good idea. Sit right in the middle, like behind the conductor if you can, to really know how these things sound in real life, and it will help make a huge difference. And then, of course, get inspired. Pablo Picasso once said, good artists copy, amazing artists steal. So that's what I've done a little bit here. So I listened to Oppenheimer soundtrack by Ludwig Göransson, fantastic soundtrack. And I've got inspired by this track by Quantum Mechanics. I'm just going to play a few seconds here. And it's not even about the chords or the exact melody line. So I've just taken his concept and made something out of it. I mean, you'll hear immediately what I'm talking about when I mean concept. So this is Quantum Mechanics by Ludwig Göransson. And then this is my trailer track for the Chamber Strings Essentials library. So as you can hear, the concept is taken over from Göransson's track. The melody, the chords, etc. is completely different, but I really got inspired by specifically that track for this trailer here. I'm making use of a lot of sounds, some production tricks. I just quickly want to run through how I've applied in a track like this, what I've been talking about in this tutorial. So I'm using the long harmonics here. That's kind of my Evo here. It doesn't move that much, but it creates this kind of tension sound. Then the legatos, obviously we've talked about this before. That's my main kind of motive here, violins 1. And so on, ascending, and then right in the end here, descending for my ending there. I'm using some trills. Again, they really help for the tension and for a build up there. Combined with second violin's trills a little bit lower. Viola tremolo coming in. So again, you can hear the dynamics and the expression changing there, so it gets a little bit louder. And I'm not just turning the instrument up, I'm turning the dynamic up, so it transitions into these louder performances, and it just sounds really, really lovely. Again, here, celli shorts, spiccato, and I'm using some small production trick here. I have here a stereo delay, and automation sometimes is really important. It can, in a slightly boring motif or something like that, it changes just over time. So here I'm sending this to the delay. So it's just a subtle change, but the delay is just increasing. So your ears aren't drawn to kind of just a super repetitive thing that is just really stagnating. Then the bass, I'm using here I'm layering sounds. So I'm doing pizzicato and spiccato together. So bass legato in the end. Extremely useful trick, this one, putting the sine wave an octave below the bass. Just makes your orchestral compositions really, really rich and just kind of makes your studio shake. Then I'm using the ensembles here. The ensembles patch is where all the instruments are nicely programmed for you. So if I play something up here, it addresses the violins. In the middle, it's probably a mix between viola, low register violin, and high register cello. Just really nice to sketch things out. Here I'm laying it just under my composition a little bit just to fill out the space with strings. And I'm using a really good trick here, which is taking out a few dBs around 2K. So I'm just going to show you this, how this sounds with it. So can you hear what's happening? It's like pushing the strings into the back a little bit. It makes it sound a little more silky. And this is an extremely good trick if you record live strings or live brass and they're a little bit too harsh and too close. It's just as simple as that, taking a few dBs away around the 2K mark, and it just makes it sound really lovely and comfortable for the ears. So that was my last trick. I think there's a bunch of things in this tutorial. I hope I could help you out in one way or another. If you have more questions, please leave them in the comment section and we're happy to get back to you. Take care and see you on the next one. Bye bye.